All right, and hello, welcome, and greetings, my friend. Welcome to a special edition here of the Red Delta Project podcast. I'm your humble host, as always, Matt Schifferly, with another episode to help you be fit and live free. And today we are continuing kind of a running theme here at RDP, questioning the necessity of using a caloric surplus if you want to build muscle. I've long been critical of bulking and cutting, or the idea of do you need to be in a caloric surplus and everything? And there's good reason for this. It's because a lot of the misconceptions about building muscle around do you need a calorie surplus and how much do you need to eat and stuff imparts a great deal of stress on body, mind, and lifestyle that is just simply flat out not necessary. And because of this, a lot of times people are eating way too much food. They're putting on body fat that then they have to diet off and work off, and it creates a lot more work for not a whole lot more benefit. And because of that, you're basically stacking the deck against you for building the beautiful strength that you want, building the body that you want, is that you're doing it the hard way. And I've long talked about the necessity of calorie surplus. People are like, do you need to be in a calorie surplus? And of course, the answer is no, because if it's necessary, that's not a surplus. And before we jump into the research here, we're citing some new research that was reviewed by Stronger by Science, just came into my inbox today, and I'll put a link down below to it and stuff. But a couple of quick caveats here and ways to look at this right now is that, of course, by definition, a surplus is an amount of something you have no good use for. So if you're eating more calories and you build muscle, that's not a surplus. So in the article, they make a very good point to discuss that when you're in a calorie surplus, you're getting fatter, because that's what a real calorie surplus does. It's adding calories you have no use for, you put on body fat. So that's what they properly define as a calorie surplus. You're eating enough that you put on body fat. Maintenance is relative calorie balance, calories in, calories out, including the caloric demand for building muscle and working to maintain that muscle. And then a caloric deficit, of course, is you're consuming less calories than you are actively burning and you're losing body fat. And so that's the fundamentals that we want to make sure we're covering here, and why sometimes what we think is a calorie surplus and we build muscle really isn't a calorie surplus, which I'll get into here in a little bit. So anyway, a couple of big key points here that they address in the article. Number one, being a calorie surplus certainly can help you build muscle and may give you a slight advantage for building muscle. Obviously, that's nobody's disputing that. I've never said that's not the case. I've never said it doesn't work or anything like that. I've always just said it's not necessary to do that, because it's the necessity or the belief in the necessity of a calorie surplus that screws us over. You can certainly go on a calorie surplus. I've known people who've done this throughout the years where they're like, I know I don't need to quite eat this much. I just want to make sure that I'm getting enough to support my workouts, recovery, and muscle growth. And to that, I say, yeah, great, go for it. Awesome. I just always want to address, like, you don't have to do that, though, if you don't want to. You don't need to do that. So in the article, they say, yes, a calorie surplus where you're eating so much that you're putting on body fat will certainly help you build muscle, maybe even give you a slight edge. Okay. Calorie maintenance, as they discussed here, where your caloric balance is relatively stable and stuff, that you certainly can put on muscle with that as well. That's clearly shown in the research. And you can also be losing body fat to some degree, because some of the caloric expenditure that you're using for the workouts and to support muscle growth can be supported with the additional fat burning. So body recomp is 100% possible. This has been shown in the research over the years, anecdotally as well. I've seen it happen. I've done it many times. So the whole debate out there is like, can you recomp? Can you build muscle and lose fat at the same time? The answer to that, flat out 100%, yes. It is absolutely true. It's easier for some people than for others, but it is definitely not a myth. It's not something that's not impossible. And this is important because a lot of the talk in our fitness culture is that, well, if you want to build muscle, you've got to eat in a surplus. And if you want to lose fat, you've got to be in a deficit. So you've got to pick your lane. You can't do both at the same time. And that's just flat out 100% wrong. You absolutely can do it. But like I said, it's going to be easier for certain individuals, which we'll get into here in a little bit. But there's a couple of really cool points that came up in this research that I really want to point to, which is one thing in particular very interesting and telling. This is something I've looked for years, and no one could give me an answer to this because a lot of times when people are like, you got to be in a surplus, you got to eat more, you got to eat a lot to build muscle. And I'd always be like, well, how much? Can you give me numbers? Can you give me a ballpark estimate? How much, how many calories do I need to eat in order to build a pound of muscle or so forth? Because if we can't get that, then we're still just guessing. We're still just eating huge amounts of food, crossing our fingers, and hoping it's just going to build muscle through blind luck that we're eating enough, which is one of the biggest reasons why we have this idea of just keep eating more, 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 more. Remember that a lot of times we overdo things in life and fitness because we don't have a target. When you don't know where the target is, you're always just going to keep aiming higher and higher and higher, or lower, 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 not realizing that you've far passed by the level that you need to be at in order to make that thing happen. And anytime more, 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 or less, 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 less is your objective, you don't know when to stop. And that's when you get much more stress on body, mind, and lifestyle, and usually also compromises the very results you're going after. So this is one of the things that I was looking for is how much do you need to actually eat? Because we get that number for caloric deficit. If I want to lose a pound of body fat, we've known that you need roughly to burn a estimated amount of 3,500 calories per pound of body fat in a deficit. And there's ways this can get nuanced and really technical and everything, but we have a number. We have a target we can at least shoot for to get in the general ballpark. But when it came to muscle, I could never find this sort of thing. But here we have it. And taking quote directly from the article, again, link below, says, if you're lucky, you might gain around 2 to 4 pounds of muscle in a year. I know right there, that's shocking to a lot of people because people are like, can I gain 15 pounds of muscle in 6 weeks? No. If you're a beginner, if you're someone like me, when I got into strength training, coming out of college, I was a cardio junkie and stuff. I put on a noticeable amount of body fat, around 10, 12 pounds or so in 6 months. That was real fast for a natty guy like me, not to mention a scrawny, skinny cardio junkie like myself. But that's usually not the way it works. 2 to 4 pounds of muscle in a year, that's pretty good numbers. If you can gain 5 pounds of solid beef in a year, for most people, that's pretty good. Of course, if you're built like Andre the Giant and you start strength training, you're just a bigger guy. Bigger guys are going to have an easier time putting on muscle because you just got more material to work with. But for the average Joe Schmo, 2 to 4 pounds, yeah, that's pretty good. That's not bad. So it goes on to say 2 to 4 pounds of muscle in a year, let's say round up and say like 5 or so. With these figures in mind, the energetic costs of depositing that muscle mass would be around 3,450 to 9,800 kilocalories per year. And roughly, again, ballparks, there's all sorts of nuances to this, but it gives us an interesting number to go for, which means when you bring that to a daily scale, that means the muscle building process would require roughly between 10 to 30 calories a day. 10 to 30 calories a day, that's a number that's so small, you're not even going to measure it. You could be the most diligent calorie counting expert in the world and still not get the accuracy to know if you're actually eating 30 more calories a day. You know, when people come to me and they're like, oh yeah, I was in a 200 calorie surplus or deficit the other day, I'm like, you don't know that. There's no way you can have your calorie measurements that accurate in real world situations. It's just, calorie counting is a very much an imprecise way to go about it. It doesn't mean it's bad or you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying you're not that accurate. There's just no way. I mean, I had a friend in college who was a calorie counting, like almost to the point of obsessive compulsive. And she would count the number of times she would climb the stairs up to her dorm room every day. Like we were downstairs one time, we were going out to a club or something, and she's like, oh, well, shoot, I forgot my ID. So she went up to her dorm room, came back down, and we're like, okay, let's go. And she's like, hang on. She took out her notebook. I'm like, gotta write down, climb the stairs 2 more times, you know, and this time I skipped stairs, so that counts for something. It's like, wow, she was like that. And even then, you're not gonna get that accuracy kind of thing. So the practical takeaways are meaningful from this sort of thing is that there's some new insights that this type of research brings about. In light of the idea that you can certainly recomp with calorie rough maintenance, means that a surplus, again, is just not necessary. You don't need to do it. You don't need to bulk and cut. You don't have to put on 10, 20. I've even known guys to put on 30 pounds of fat over a winter in the effort to build muscle. It's like, it's just not necessary. You're just eating more than you need to. It's just creating more work that doesn't need to be there. Here's another way to look at it, though, is that as the research has shown, yes, there can be an advantage to building muscle in a surplus if you want to get that small advantage. However, there is a very distinct disadvantage to building muscle in a caloric deficit. Now, yes, you can build muscle in a deficit. That has been shown in the research, but the greater the deficit is, the harder it's going to be, down to the point where it's just going to be darn near impossible. So if you have a very slight deficit of like a couple hundred calories, which again, good luck getting that kind of accuracy, building muscle is still technically possible. It is feasible. It does happen, but it's not probable, and it's going to be slower, because at the end of the day, it's always about a rate of speed. We're not talking about how much muscle can you build. It's how fast can you build it. So in your maintenance, in the deficit or surplus, you may overall still end up building 10 pounds of muscle. It's just a question of how fast are you going to do it. Now, here's the big takeaway that I got from this sort of thing. Say there is definitively, like, yes, if you're in a surplus, there's an advantage to building muscle. Great. However, that surplus means you're going to put on body fat. And if you want a good looking or the sculpted physique, obviously you're going to want to carve off that body fat at some point, which means you've got to cut, which means you have to be in a caloric deficit to some degree, which means you have to spend a very significant amount of time significantly decreasing your chances of building muscle mass. So let me give you this scenario here. Option A, be in a caloric maintenance-ish, for the better part throughout the year. Give yourself a good chance of maintaining a relatively lean body and build muscle all year long. Okay, that's option A. Or option B, you can go on a caloric surplus and potentially build a bit more muscle, let's say 1 extra pound here, but you're only going to be able to build muscle half the year. The other half of the year, you're not going to be able to build an ounce. All those workouts, all that time in the gym, all of that effort that you go into it, you're not, imagine if I guaranteed that. Imagine if I came to you and said, I guarantee you're not going to build muscle or stand a chance of building muscle 50% of the time. You'd be like, oh, to hell with that. No, I just want to build muscle all the time. It's like, yeah, but that's what bulking and cutting very highly it produces. The probability it produces is, yeah, even if there's the big advantage or a slight advantage of building muscle in a surplus, you're also giving yourself a massive disadvantage, because you have to cut. And why are we cutting? Because you are in a surplus to begin with. And this is why I'm always attacking the idea of the necessity of the surplus. Again, I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it may not even be worth it. I'm just saying that it's not going to be worth it for most people, because they're following along this idea of I've got to eat like crazy because we've been told it's necessary to build muscle, and it just isn't. You just don't have to do it. And therefore, I certainly like to go in the idea of I want to give myself the best chance possible, not of building the most muscle, but of building muscle all the time. I don't want to build muscle for, 2 or 3 months and then be like, okay, no chance of building muscle for the next 5 months. Great. No, I don't want that. I want to have at least a decent chance of always building muscle. I don't care if I build an extra pound or 2 or even 5 during a bulk, because I don't want to spend time with crappy workouts where I'm struggling to push my repetitions and a decreased performance because I'm in a deficit for the sake of dieting off that body fat. So let's talk some practical applications, some practical takeaways with this sort of thing. What does this leave you with? Well, first and foremost, the dietary protocol here at Red Delta Project is eat to satisfy. I'm not going to tell you to be in a deficit or a surplus or anything like that under most circumstances. The approach we use here is eat to satisfy your appetites. Eat to satisfy your hunger, your nutritional needs, your metabolic support and recovery, of course, from workouts, and yes, even your hedonic desires, your emotional needs from food as well. That's our foundation here at RDP, is get that taken care of first. I don't care if you want to build or lose or be whatever. That's our foundation. Eat to satisfy first and foremost, because regardless if you want to build or if you want to lose body fat, health and well-being is always a foremost important priority for your body. That's what it's geared for. So when you're eating to satisfy your appetites, you're putting your health and your well-being first and foremost. Second of all, eating to satisfy gives you the best chance of always eating enough in order to build muscle and recover from your workouts. Needing to satisfy it, it makes it individual. Some people need to eat a lot more. Some people eat a lot less. And because of your body type, your activity level, maybe you have a labor intensive job. So, and it ebbs and flows too. There are certainly times and periods in my life where I'll go through and I'm crushing my workouts and I'm really being productive and I'm more active and my appetite goes through the roof. So what do? I eat a lot more to begin with, because I'm always concerned with, am I satisfying my fundamental appetites? That's always the most important thing by far. And if you are doing that, you give yourself a very, very good chance of supporting your nutritional and caloric needs to always give yourself a good chance of building muscle. Not just some of the time, not just only, when you're in surplus, but all the time. So that's one of the many reasons why our philosophy here is eat to satisfy, not just for building muscle, not just for staying lean and getting abs, but also for health and, again, removing stress from body, mind, and lifestyle. If you want to build muscle, get that first. Don't even talk to me about bulking or calorie surpluses unless you're first and foremost doing that sort of thing. Then, if you are like, well, I think I might be better off eating a bit more, by all means, eat more. I'm always a fan of eating plenty of food. I eat 4 or 5 meals a day, just because that's my way of eating. I love to eat a lot. Trust me, ask my parents when I was growing up. They'd be like, oh, good, dinner time. Matt's going to sit at the dinner table and continue eating. I'm always eating to a large degree, even as I'm getting older now in my mid 40s, and I'm still got a pretty good appetite. If you are someone who is building muscle, who's strength training and everything like that, and you're like some of these guys who I've known and seen and stuff, and you're a hefty dude, you've got a good amount of body fat on you, chances are really good you don't need to be overeating to build muscle. Because I've always said, like, if you need calories to support muscle growth, you have them on your body. Your body fat is just sitting there waiting to be used for anything that creates a caloric demand, including building muscle. So if you're already fairly heavy, you probably don't need to just get on the train of, I got to eat more, 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 more. You've covered that base. You're done. Look to other influences for your potential to build muscle. You got the nutrition thing covered. You're done. However, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, like I was coming out of school, pretty lean, ectomorphic, kind of, well, let's just say what it is, scrawny ass guy, cardio junkie. I weighed 150 pounds getting out of school. I was like single digit body fat and stuff. Then yeah, you probably are going to want to eat more if you're starting a muscle building journey like I was. It's not just because you need a lot of calories to build muscle or anything like that, but a lot of times individuals like I was coming out of school where I was downright scrawny, a lot of times that's because there's some messages, some rhetoric in our own mind telling us that, oh, careful, you don't want to eat too much. Oh, careful, you don't want to eat too many foods of, processed foods. Oh, careful, careful. Sometimes we get this idea of food is something we need to be afraid of. And that was certainly my case. And guys who are like the hard gainers and are having trouble putting on muscle often have this type of subliminal messages going through their minds of like, oh, can't eat too much, gotta really restrict. And this is where we fall into a lot of ideas that a healthy diet is somehow restrictive in nature. Intermittent fasting, only eat 1 or 2 meals a day, never eat processed foods, never eat anything that's not natural or organic, don't eat any carbs or pastas and breads, whatever the source is, right? When you have a dietary approach that's about restriction, it's going to be harder to build muscle because you're just inadvertently restricting your caloric reserves. Now, it's important to recognize that both a caloric deficit and a surplus are temporary states. You can't endlessly be in a deficit or a surplus because your body's always going to adapt to an increase in caloric expenditure or a decrease in caloric intake for the sake of regaining homeostasis. That's how fitness works. That's how everything about fitness works. Is our body changes and adapts to whatever our conditions are to regain a homeostatic balance. In this case, in the case of calorie balance. So if you're someone who's pretty lean and lanky and skinny like I was, and you've got restrictions and stuff, then you probably are going to be much better off taking off those restrictions, at least to a large degree, or maybe even entirely, to give yourself the better chance of satisfying your fundamental appetites because you've been holding yourself back for so long. Your body's adapted to the lower caloric intake. So you're holding yourself back, in other words. And this is a lot of times where the idea that you need to be in a caloric surplus comes about. Because when I got out of school, I started lifting and everything, it was slow going. Then I was like, all right, screw this dieting stuff, screw the restrictions and everything like that. I'm just going to go and eat sandwiches and get some cookies at lunch. And I'm just going to just eat as I normally would. I'm not going to pig out, but I'm going to not restrict myself anymore. And man, everything changed big time real quick. I had a lot less hunger. My immune system functioned a lot better. I was sleeping better. My energy level went through the roof. And yes, I started to build a lot more noticeable muscle. Was I in a surplus? No. I was finally just eating enough to support my gains. And that's not a surplus. Eating more is not a surplus. A surplus, again, is when you eat so much that you start putting on noticeable amounts of body fat. And if you inevitably, we all do this, we all get in a surplus from time to time. If you're putting on body fat, pay attention to that though. Sometimes, especially now we got the holidays coming up, we're going to be in a surplus. I always go in a surplus during the holidays. Stuff. Notice how that makes you feel. You know, you're eating more, you're eating a little bit more relaxed on the diet and everything. Do you feel better energy wise? Are you recovering better? Do you feel like you're kind of packing on some more muscle? Are you filling your muscles with glycogen and things like that? If you're noticing those positive benefits while still putting on some body fat, that tells you that chronically you're probably underfeeding yourself a little bit. So you should be eating more all the time, just not so much that you're in a surplus. But if you're like me now and you're generally eating to satisfy and you're pretty good at it, I get in a surplus, I put on some body fat, I can see it in my face, I notice it in my belly and stuff, but there's no benefits to it. I don't recover better. I don't build any muscle. I don't have any benefits. I'm like, yeah, I'm probably eating enough most of the time. There's no point in trying to eat more in a surplus. And so these are the main points that I wanted to bring up. Again, the link to the Stronger by Science article is down below. Finally figured out how to get to those darn things. But it's just really telling about some of the rhetoric that we've long believed and why a lot of times our efforts to be fit and live free means breaking free of the old stigmas and dogmatic ideologies that hold us back. And it's not so much that things are right or wrong, it's just the fact that we think the rules are necessary. It's like, what do I need to do in order to do this? And that's how RDP came about. And the fundamental approach to fitness, that on how fitness actually works, finally got built around all my books and everything, is I stopped asking what works or what's effective. I don't care if a surplus builds more muscle. It's irrelevant. All I care about is it necessary? You have to do it. Because a lot of times forcing ourselves to follow rules that don't put us in alignment or hold us back are what are truly hurting us, hurting our results, hurting our quality of life, hurting our health, stressing mind, body, and lifestyle. And the only reason why we do these things is because we think we have to. And by and large, you don't. And that's the message that I want to give to people in my videos, books, and of course here on the podcast is, you know, this rule you think you need to follow, you don't have to follow it. You could follow it just fine if you want to. I'm not saying don't do it. By all means, go for it. But you don't have to if you don't want to. And that's where you have empowerment and freedom, my friends. That's where things get a lot more interesting for both results, but also for quality of life and having a heck of a lot more fun along the way. So now you don't need to be in a surplus. You can do it just fine in a relative calorie balance. And that's something that you can get into. And yeah, sure, you can touch toe the line and get a little surplus for a little bit and then cut back and surplus and cut back. That's perfectly fine too. But my heart goes out to these guys I've known for years, and in some cases, even women, where they're packing on 10, 15, 20 plus pounds of fat. And then they go through dieting and tons of cardio and energy to get rid of the fat. And it's like so much work and it's such a pain. And yeah, at top levels of like bodybuilders or figure competitors, you need to do everything you can to get the smallest bit of benefit. But man, it's so much work for so little benefit that for the vast majority of us, it's just not going to be worth it. It's just not going to be worth it. And if it's not worth it, that crushes motivation. That crushes our desire to do it. And that's even if it's something that we can do. Because I've known a few individuals where they go bulk up during the winter and they're like, okay, time to cut and lean down. And they can't do it. And they're like, oh no. And then they spend the rest of the year, or they spend, perpetually more time with a bit of a gut. And they're like, well, how do I get this? And now they got 6 months, a few months of productive muscle building. And it's been like 3 years and they're still trying to lose that excess body fat. So it's a little bit of benefit for a lot of work. And oh, Ben's saying the screen is black. That's interesting. I'm seeing it just fine. Sorry, Ben. I'm not showing anything blocking. Can everybody else see me? Okay. So Apex, good question here. Say, what about someone who works manual labor and utilizes surplus while managing training physical labor? Any specific nutrition for someone in that position? So this is why eat to satisfy is the mantra here, is because the fact is we all have a caloric demand. We have a certain amount of demand of how many calories we need in a day. Doesn't matter if it's manual labor, if you're a pro level athlete, if you're on your feet all day, if you have a high it all goes into this is what contributes to your total caloric demand. So you should eat enough to meet that demand. Speaking as someone who's done a lot of manual labor in my life, made a big mistake because, again, I had the ideas of like, oh, I got to restrict food and everything like that when I was, doing heavy manual labor for 9-10 hours a day. And I'd be starving and absolutely famished because that's what I thought was necessary, was I had to restrict my food intake in many ways. When I wish I could go back in time and be like, dude, eat. You're doing more physical activity with this manual labor job than you ever would in the gym. So you need to eat to make that happen. So eat to satisfy means eat as much as you need to satisfy your appetites. And when you're having more of a caloric demand, your appetite's naturally going to go up. You're naturally going to need more food. So yes, eat more food. That's not a surplus though. Again, we've got to get really definitive about what a surplus is. Because if you are couch potato, fairly sedentary, and then one summer you take on a heavy manual labor job working in a rock quarry, your caloric demand is going to skyrocket, and suddenly you're eating 2-foot-long sandwiches at the local deli every day. That's not a surplus. That's called eating enough to support your job. That's eating enough. So that's why I'm always saying definitely eat enough. And if you need to eat a lot of food to eat enough, yes, absolutely. If you've got something in your lifestyle, like heavy manual labor, that is creating a very significant caloric demand on you, then yeah, eat a lot. You got to eat a lot for that. Support yourself. But that's not a surplus. That's just eating enough. But at the same time, and this is called a relative negative calorie or relative calorie surplus, is you're eating a lot. You see this with athletes, and then their activity level drops down. You stop doing the job. You're no longer practicing as an athlete because you graduated college and you get a desk job or whatever, but you still keep that diet. Now you're in a surplus, not because you're eating more, but your caloric demand dropped. And that happens a lot to particularly college athletes, where they're doing 2-a-day practices and they're competing and everything like that. And then they graduate and they go get a desk job with lots of high calorie takeout and everything. And they wake up a couple of years later and they're like, where did this gut come from? And why is my blood work all over the place and everything? It's like, I'm having the same diet I had when I was in college. It's like, yeah, but you're not doing 2-a-day practices anymore. You're doing a 5K every weekend and not really out that much. And that's what happened to me. When I got out of college, I was doing 3 to 4 hours of high intensity cardio every day. And then I got out of school and that dropped to 3 or 4 hours a week. So yeah, my caloric demand dropped, but I followed suit and I dropped my diet intake as well. And so you're just adjusting to your demand. It's just adding to demand or taking it away. But you don't eat a special way because of a thing in your life. This is the big mistake we often make is we think I've got this job or I've got this activity that I'm doing. Don't I need to eat special for that? The answer is no. If it's creating a significant demand on your calorie and your nutritional needs, then yes, eat more to satisfy the demand. But if you're getting that demand met anyway, because a lot of times we're not really creating that much of a demand, it feels like it, but it's not. When people are like working out, lifting weights, which literally these days means you're spending more time doom scrolling in between sets and everything. So you're really not doing that much. You're not creating that much of a demand in many cases. There was a guy I used to follow, not stalking, but he would work out in the gym when I'm like cleaning the equipment and everything, and he was always like this on his phone, just talking on his phone the whole time. And maybe he would do some tricep kick, push downs, and then he'd talk on his phone some more and everything. And one day I took a stopwatch, and I was like, I'm wondering how much he actually does. He was in the gym for 3 hours and he did a total of 12 minutes of actual physical activity. And even then, it was like tricep push downs and stuff, which barely burns anything. So then, after that, 3 hour workout and everything, he went and he bought like these. We used to, I don't know if they still make them, they're called muscle milks. They're basically like ready made protein shakes. And he'd drink 4 of those at a time. And I'm like, why? I got more of a caloric demand and a workout cleaning the treadmills than you did in your workout. But because we think it's like, because it's a workout, because it's this thing, we think it's a big deal when it really isn't. And that's sometimes we obey the label than anything else. I used to eat a whole lot because I would go to my martial arts class, but I would not eat anymore, even though I was doing a 9 hour a day high labor job. When the high labor job was huge caloric demand, and that Taekwondo class, knowing what I know now, probably wasn't creating more than a couple hundred calories of demand. So we got to make sure we're obeying the demand of our activities, not the fact that we are doing an activity kind of thing. Demetrius, folks weighing in pretty well muscled and agree that eating enough is all that's necessary. Yeah, because it's enough. Because it's enough. Sometimes that may take quite a bit to be enough, but that's the goal here: is eat enough. Don't just endlessly go for more, 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 less, less, less. That's when we get into trouble. Appetite's healthy and unhealthy foods. Very good. Very good. Wolfie Dragon, it's good to see you. Eating enough protein to help with recovery is a priority. Yes, it just takes longer to recover for me as I'm getting older. Yeah, and that goes for, the rest of us. I'm, 47 now, and I certainly recover a lot slower than I used to. Uh, Comes with age. Of course, you want to make sure that you're not holding yourself back with things that slow you down. You want to make sure you're getting plenty of sleep, you're managing stress, eating plenty of food, getting protein, as well as everything else. Recovery is more than just protein. Carbohydrate is part of the equation as well. And that doesn't mean you need to sit down to a massive bowl of pasta or anything. But again, usually when we have dietary approaches that are all about restriction, you're making it harder to satisfy your appetites, which is why most of the time when people are looking to get healthier, or they're especially looking to perform at a higher level as an athlete or build muscle, say step one, don't diet unless you have a medical reason for it or a personal reason, like a religious reason for it or stuff. Don't have any restrictions at all in your dietary approach. That rhetoric is very strong in our Western dietary culture that your diet's healthy because you restrict yourself. It's not. That's not how a healthy diet works. You have a healthy diet because you satisfy your appetites. And when you have restriction, the more restrictions you have, the harder it is going to be in order to satisfy your appetites, which means that you're climbing an uphill battle for much less benefit. So that's why I usually tell people, just if you're in a dietary restriction pattern, get rid of it. If you don't want it, you don't need it, then there's no reason to have it. Ben following saying, as a calisthenics guy, it's really not useful to pack on pounds of fat. Good point. Yeah. Or a cyclist or runner, a lot of activities are weight to strength ratios. I sometimes would like to bulk, but it really screws the progression. So it depends on what your progression is there, Ben. Like for me, I've gotten certainly a lot heavier as I've gotten older, putting on muscle, especially in my upper body. Like I said, when I got out of school, I was 150 pounds. I'm 200 plus now. And yeah, I'm not nearly as capable on a numbers standpoint as I used to be. I'm a lot slower on the bike, and I can't do as many reps, particularly with a lot of the big full body exercises like pull-ups. I don't care though, because my goals have nothing to do with the numbers. I don't care how many pull-ups I can do. I don't care how fast I can ride my bike up Lookout Mountain. If I did, then you better believe I would be trying to lose a lot of weight, because that's what's important for that sort of thing. But I just want to look and feel good. And if it takes me 35 minutes to get up Lookout Mountain versus 29 minutes, doesn't matter. That doesn't impact that goal at all. Again, I'm trying to build muscle. I just got to challenge my work capacity. If I can do that in 8 repetitions versus 15 repetitions, I'm getting to the same result. It doesn't really matter. So that's my goal, is to challenge my work capacity. And if I'm lighter or I use an easier exercise, I just got to do more reps to get there. But if I'm bigger and heavier and using more resistance, well, then I'm using less reps to get there. So it all depends on what the goal is, though, of course. If your goal is, I want to be a kick-ass calisthenics street performer, athlete, then yeah, it matters a great deal. And then it something to consider. So this is why it's always so important to understand the fundamental objective relative to your goals of what you're doing, because that shows you just how necessary or unnecessary most of the rules are. Because it's not right or wrong. Again, it's most of the times people are like, this is what you got to do, this is what you need to do and stuff. But the fact is, it's for a different goal set. It's for a different amount of outcomes. And if it's not relative to what you want, then no, it's not a rule that you need to follow. And that's the biggest thing that we want to take home from what our goals, what is absolutely necessary to reach those goals. Because when you understand what is necessary to reach your goals, you realize that the vast majority of rules and restrictions and things that we're told we need to do are just not necessary. And that's where we find freedom, and you find empowerment for your best life. It also gives you much sharper edge for pinpointing exactly what you do need to do, or what's going to be most effective for you to achieve that goal. So in the case of like building muscle, we got to challenge our muscular work capacity, effectively use a lot of the muscular energy in a relatively short period of time, generally with strength training sort of thing. So you can do any exercises you want. You can do any sort of program you like. You can do whatever sets and reps. You can do whatever type of training modality. I like calisthenics, but some people like sandbags or bands or whatever, right? You have a lot of freedom to do whatever you want, because as long as you're going after and able to achieve the fundamental objective on a consistent basis, that's all that matters. That's all that's necessary for you to get the results you want. When it comes to dietary approaches, healthier diets are all about satisfying your fundamental appetites: hunger and metabolic support, nutritional support, and hedonic support. You get those things met on a regular basis, your diet's healthy. I don't care if you eat red meat or not. It doesn't matter if you've got whole grains versus, white rice in there and stuff. Just get those things met. And generally, of course, you're going to have an easier time doing that with the general rules that are out there. Plenty of whole foods, not too much alcohol, making sure you're staying hydrated, getting protein and plants at each meal, the kind of stuff that we learned from grade school on a healthy diet. That's going to get you pretty close to it. But you want to have the freedom to tweak and change things around however you see fit that's going to be best for you. For example, I've learned over the years that I'm a hell of a lot healthier and better off if I have a little bit of ice cream in my diet on a regular basis. So I always have ice cream in my freezer. I'm not eating a pint a day like I did at one point back when I had like exercise bulimia and stuff. But I've known that if I just keep a little bit of ice cream in my diet to some degree, I'm just better off, a lot better off. Cravings plummet, energy level goes up, just better off. So that's why I eat ice cream. It doesn't have any downsides for me or anything like that. It's one of those things that I've just learned about me because it is about, proverbially knowing yourself, knowing what is best for you. But again, I linked to the article down below for the review from Stronger by Science. It's a fairly quick read, and I highly recommend you get on their newsletter list because it's really good. They don't spam you with a whole bunch of stuff. It's always just very insightful things like the newsletter today on the research on is body recomp possible? That's what it's about, is body recomp possible? And the shorter answer is absolutely. And when you recognize the unnecessary nature of a very strong calorie surplus, then that gives you the greater chance of burning fat and building muscle at the same time. All right, folks, quick one today. Thank you very much for coming on in. Again, I'll have my usual podcast Q&A coming up this Saturday, 2:30 Mountain Standard Time or Mountain Time. I don't know why I always slip in the standard there. So thank you very much, everybody. I hope to see you there. Good luck with your workouts this week. Till then, be fit and live free.